What advice would you give an aspiring investor that's 6 to 12 months behind you?
Educate yourself as much as you can. Don't be afraid to get on the phone and call the people that are doing what you want to do. If you're listening to podcasts like this, you will run across those folks that have recently been where you want to be, and reach out to them, because there is no better way to learn than to talk to someone who's done it.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Four Oaks Capital. Got another great show for you queued up today. It's one of our first deal series episodes, and we have Todd Bowen on the line with us. And Todd and his partners recently closed on a 48-unit apartment complex in Ankeny, Iowa, a suburb of Des Moines, for a $3 million purchase price. So that said, Todd, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Glad to be here and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation, and we're going to have Todd's bio and how to contact him in the show notes. So if you're interested in that, check it out. But that said, Todd, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right. So yeah, my name is Todd Bowen, and I'm in the West Michigan market, up here where we have about 3 months of summer and 9 months of winter. So we're just about into winter. So yeah, I'm married and have 2 young ones, and started investing in real estate about 4.5 years ago now.
Okay. All right. What prompted the first real estate investment?
So initially it was just that lack of confidence in the market. Had a typical W-2 job and was maxing out the 401ks, and just the volatility that we were seeing really led me to want to diversify our investments as a household. Yep. And so, real estate kept coming up in searches, and was always kind of on the back burner, back of my mind. Started to pursue that further.
Yeah. Something that I've recently found, and I guess recently realized, and I now find funny, is, real estate has traditionally been the original investment. I mean, for hundreds and hundreds of years before our stock markets and everything else, real estate was how people invested. And I think it's kind of funny how we've turned, and society's turned, where, real estate is now an alternative investment, to help people diversify from the stock market. But anyway, I did the same thing, looking to diversify. That's what got me jumping into real estate as well. So tell us a little bit about, your background before that. What do you do for a job, and basically paint the picture into, the decisions you made to get into real estate.
Sure. So I was a project manager at an engineering company, and I was there for 13 years. And I figured that my project management skills would cross over nicely into the real estate world after studying and learning about real estate. So I did use some of those skills, but ultimately I did not want to be in an office every day, and I did not want to be working for another company, as a lot of people can relate, making them the money. I just felt somewhere deep down inside that entrepreneurial spirit kind of calling, and, needing to express that and see, if I could do it on my own. And real estate was that direction that I wanted to go.
Yeah. I think that's similar to what a lot of people feel. I don't like to be cooped up in an office myself. And I think part of my career choice was based around, not being in an office as much as possible. But like I said, a lot of people go through kind of the same progression, where it's thought I'd like my job, or I do like my job, but it's not quite fulfilling. So I
just didn't see myself being there for the next, 20 to 30 years and doing the same thing. So it was a great change.
And something else you brought up that I'd like to point out is you said that you thought your project management skills would translate well to real estate. Most people in whatever their profession is, they're typically something from their profession that will translate well to, real estate investing, especially apartment investing. So, for a lot of people, when they're making the transition from the W-2 to, real estate investing, they can rely on the skills they've built in their previous profession to help them out in investing, and
Absolutely.
then find partners to kind of help them out, help them find, the skill sets they may not have. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But before we
Sure.
get there, you also mentioned, learning about the real estate space. What did you do to, learn about real estate in general, and then more specifically about multifamily?
Yeah, so once my mind was made up to pursue real estate, and that's the direction we wanted to go. And when I say we, I'm talking about my family, my wife and I. It was all about reading anything I could get my hands on. And it was utilizing all of my windshield time at my job, driving to and from work, to gain an education by listening to podcasts such as this one.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I could. So I completely stopped listening to the radio. I would listen to them on 1.5 speed, and I would skip all the advertisements.
All the ads. Yep.
And I would just consume as much information as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of confirmed the feeling I had for wanting to get into real estate. A little confirmation bias there. Definitely that's what we wanted to do. We believed in it. And so, we set out to go down that path. And to your point on multifamily, I was looking for cash flow immediately. So, in my studying and reading and conclusion, it was we needed to go multifamily to increase the number of units and the amount of cash flow as soon as possible, so we could sustain, this business that's starting from scratch, and start that snowball, so to speak.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with that sentiment. I mean, multifamily, it's a lot easier to scale with multifamily, and it's a lot easier to have more consistent cash flow with multifamily. And I'm comparing multifamily to single family when I say that, just because you have one single family home and one renter moves out. You have zero income coming in. With a multifamily property, with a similar upfront investment, you can have 3, 4, 5, or 10, or in your case, 48 renters, which basically mitigates a lot of the risk there. So a lot of good points there. So one thing that I always say, and a lot of people will say the same thing, multifamily investing is a team sport. And I know you have a team, in this deal yourself. Can you tell us about how your team came together and how you guys divided and conquered this particular deal?
Yeah, sure thing, Brian. And if I could just take a step back, I've covered 3.5 years in a few sentences. And I think just for context, I need to go back to, we started in 2017. And so we built, as a side hustle, a portfolio of small multifamilies. And during that time and the continued education and listening to podcasts and reading, my mind shifted to larger multifamily. And that was going to be the catalyst to eventually get me out of that W-2 job. That was the original goal when real estate was a side hustle. So that being said, through all of that, I learned real estate is a team sport. When I started, I thought it was a me sport. And, maybe that works for the first 1, 2, 3 deals. And that's okay. But as you start to look at larger multifamily deals, you recognize how much of a team effort is involved. Yeah. And so, yes, we have a team, an amazing team that I was just grateful to be asked to join. And that's how we were able to take this deal down.
Nice, nice. So yeah, I appreciate that. The context definitely helps. So and I went through the same process. It was a me sport for a while, individual sport, and found a couple of single family homes. I didn't get into small multifamily before I found multifamily, but I think a lot of people make the same progression. A lot of people start with, a couple of single family, maybe the small multifamily, and they all come to the same realization at some point where, in order to scale, you've got to start doing bigger deals. And in order to do bigger deals, you typically need a team around you. So, it looks like you went through the same progression that a lot of other people who've sat in the same seat as you on this and other podcasts have done. So let's talk about where you met your team now and how you guys came together.
So yeah, starting the year in 2021, two of my written goals were to become part of a mastermind and to participate in my first syndication. So it was tough at first to look at the cost of a mastermind and think this is beneficial. However, when I changed my mindset about a cost, an expense versus an investment, that's when I did go ahead and join a real estate mastermind. And throughout the first month of the mastermind, I was able to meet my future partners on this 48 unit deal and built a relationship over the phone and over Zoom meetings. And eventually they invited me to become part of the general partnership team for this deal that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And I'm going to highlight a couple of areas. You talk about the expense getting into the masterminds, and a lot of people look at the expense, myself included, and looked at that expense and thought, okay, I can probably do better using that money somewhere else. But, I've learned the power of your network is huge. The better your network, the better off you're going to be. And I don't necessarily like the quip, your network is your net worth, but it's true. I think you're a good case study of that, where you got into the mastermind, you put yourself around people who with similar interests, similar goals, and they helped you get your syndication goal. They invited you into the fold on that one. So let's talk a little bit about the deal specifically. Can you tell us about the deal, or who found it, how it came to pass, how you got into the deal, and tell you what, let's just go to that point and then we'll dive back into it.
Yeah, sounds good. So my partners found the deal. It was brought to them by a broker, and it, like you mentioned earlier, it's a 48 unit apartment complex in Ankeny, Iowa, and it happens to be a single story. So units are ground level. And
interesting.
Yeah, one of the nice things about it that we really enjoyed were that you can park right outside your door. So it's very well suited for an elderly population, with not having stairs and being able to park very close to your front door. It was 100% occupied, and we knew that kind of alluded to that the rent was a bit under market. And after some market research, that was the fact, indeed, where it was close to $200 per door. And there was no major CapEx issues, but the units were dated. So the current owner was just looking to retire. And like what happens a lot when they get to that stage, they want to hold on to that money and they stop pumping it back into the properties. Yeah. So we just saw an opportunity as a value add property.
All right. So I think this story's been told dozens of times before. When we get into a property that hasn't been maintained, that's 100% occupied, there's a couple of things that are almost always present. Being behind the market on rents is almost always there. I mean, typically any property that's 100% occupied is probably not pushing rents as much as they can. And, I think in your case, this makes for a perfect, storybook ending, I guess, because, you guys will be able to come in, update the units slightly, and bring rents back up to what the market, dictates, and go from there. So So let's talk a little bit, it was a $3 million purchase price. Let's talk a little bit about the capital raise, if we can, tell us about,
Sure.
what you did as far as that goes, and, how that turned out.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're set to raise 1.1 million, and that was to cover the down payment and the rehab. And when I was brought into the deal, we hadn't started the raise yet, and it was a fairly new concept to me. I understood that that's what people do, but I never actually, physically attempted to raise capital myself.
Yeah.
All the deals we did in the past were, self-funded, and this is the first time using other people's money. So they asked, they didn't expect, but they did ask, my partners I'm referring to, asked me if I would, go out and try to raise some capital. And I said, sure, no problem. How hard can it be, right?
Right.
So, yeah, when it came time to raise the capital, I went to the friends and the family, and this was a 501c. So it was accredited investors only.
Okay.
So there were some limitations there. So yeah, I had to think through, who that I knew may want to invest in real estate. The minimum investment was 50,000. So, I'm thinking, okay, who has 50,000 sitting around to dump into real estate? And
it's also accredited, which, for some people as friends and family, that's a little more difficult.
Yep. And then, you get to the question of who's going to trust me, how are they going to trust me when this is my first deal, my first big deal? Am I going to say the right things? Are they going to ask me questions that I don't know the answer to? Am I going to look like a fool? So a lot of those kind of doubt started creeping in, and it was a struggle. In the end, Brian, my attempt to even get one investor at 50,000 fell on its face, and we closed the deal without raising any capital. So it was, in theory, I've heard many, many times that if you go out and find the deal, and it's a good deal, the money will come. That may be true, and the money did eventually come, but it didn't come through my hands. It was a lot harder than I initially thought.
I appreciate you, being so open and honest about that part, because I think a lot of people, who are listening to this, that could help prevent them from making a similar mistake. I also disagree with that statement. If you have a good deal, the money will come. You have to be positioned for that to happen. You have to have something set up prior to, and you went through a lot of the same, I guess, self-doubts that I had. Why are people going to listen to me? And in my case, on our first deal, I didn't raise a whole lot of money, but those self-doubts a lot of times plagued me and kept me from raising a lot of the money. So, lesson learned that I had on our first capital raise was, I need to prepare a lot better for the next one. And I think it ended up working, but
yes, excellent point.
Yeah. So a lot of lessons learned there. And, I'm assuming that might come out in the very last question that we always ask at the end, but, we'll get there. I'm not trying to, steer you in one direction or another, but, all right. So we talked about the deal slightly, your business plan, funding the deal with the capital raise. And I know you guys have a loan on it at some point, but, talk about the overall business plan. I mean, besides the value add, bring rents up, what else is in that business plan?
Yeah. So, it's a classic value add. We discussed that. There's going to be light rehab on each unit. So in turn, with those, we'll raise rent, and we're going to force that appreciation, increase NOI, and the hold period is projected between 5 and 7 years.
Okay.
And the investors are looking to get 15 to 17% IRR, internal rate of return.
Nice.
and they will also receive a 7% preferred return
Nice.
on their investment. So
All right.
looking at a 2.25 multiplier.
Nice. Yeah. Those are some good solid numbers on there. So, 5 to 7 year hold, that gives you plenty of time to do your value add to stabilize the property and then take advantage of some of the cash flow that comes off it later. So, sounds like a pretty good deal there. So let's talk about closing, getting the deal across the finish line. Were there any big hitches, getting the deal to the closing table and actually closing on it?
Yeah, so this was a little different than closing on a duplex or a 4-unit.
Yeah,
my past. Yeah, where you can close in 10 days and you never have an issue. Yeah, unfortunately, we did have a couple of hiccups. We had a couple extensions where it's never fun to go back to the seller and ask for an extension.
Yep.
But they allowed that, and the whole reason for that was a survey issue. And something that we had not foreseen coming, but it was one of those situations where there's a week before closing and the lender reaches out and asks for a new survey. And, it kind of puts you in panic mode. You're already stressed out because you're raising capital and it's your first deal and you're trying to do all the things, and then you get the call. And so it's just, stress on top of stress. But we were able to navigate through that survey. Again, that was an additional expense that wasn't accounted for. But we were able to get that done. And with the extension, close after that was all wrapped up.
Yeah, we had a similar issue on one of our properties where the exact same thing happened to us. We had talked to the lender, early on in the process, and we had the last survey that the previous owner had in place. And our lender initially told us, yep, that survey is good enough. We're not going to need a new one. And then same story as you just mentioned, a couple of days, maybe a week before we were supposed to close, the lender came back and said, we need a new survey done, so yeah, I've literally been there before, jumping through hoops, trying to find somebody who can get out to the property and do a survey, really, really quick.
Expedite it.
Yeah. You pay an expedition fee. That doesn't sound right. You pay a fee to expedite it, and
there you go.
Cost you a little bit more, but end of the day, at that
point you're in. So
yeah,
it's what it takes.
It's jump through hoops and pay that extra fee, or potentially fall out of the deal and lose your earnest money and all your risk capital. So, at that point, the extra cost is typically a drop in the bucket, and you're like, yeah, we got to do it. You just got to do it. So
that's right.
All right.
Lesson learned.
Yep. Lesson learned. All right. So you guys closed early September. So, at the time of recording, by the time this is released, it'll be 2 months that you guys have owned it. But right now we're probably sitting at a month and a half. Tell us about the steps after closing, and what you guys have done so far.
Yeah. So the first thing after closing, we took a huge sigh of relief, a huge breath. We had some phone calls with the partners that were just, kind of the celebratory, we did it kind of discussions. And shortly after that, it doesn't take long before the thought creeps in, okay, now we have to go perform this business plan. Yeah.
Now we got to execute.
Yeah. We just got across hurdle 1, and now we have to go do the work. So it's okay, quickly back to the plan and executing that plan. And as we spoke about earlier, the business plan on this is to get in and do the light rehab as they become available. And it was shortly after closing, we did have 1 unit 48 become available. And through the use of the local property management company, who also owns the construction company, they were able to get into that first unit and are currently doing the rehab as we speak.
Yep. Awesome. Glad you guys were able to get that started so quickly. And obviously, when you look at the rehabs, you have to have people move out to renovate units. Sometimes it takes a while to start those interior renovations because people don't move out. And it's kind of hard to kick out paying tenants, when you don't have to. So
and another fact about getting that first one done is we'll be able to take the photos and maybe even stage it, but get some marketing material out of that. And then also we can use that to show existing tenants, hey, here's what we would like to do to your unit. Would you be willing to move down a couple doors, or is there something we can do with you living there, that would, improve your unit? Because we're not just about going in and milking every penny out of this property, selling it and moving on. Part of our mission is to make an impact on the community and the lives of our tenants. Yeah. So very human aspect of this. This is their home, their place where they reside and raise families and do all the things. So that's definitely, we don't want to skip over that part of the business plan.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. A lot of people, when they live somewhere, you're right. Some people are long-term tenants. And it sounds like the type of property you have, you're more inclined to have, the older couples that are going to stay there for a long, long time. So, whatever you can do to create a sense of community and, make sure they know that you're going to take care of the property and take care of them, it ends up being good business too. It's kind of counterintuitive, like catering to some of your tenants. It ends up being really good business because those types of tenants tend to be stickier. They tend to pay their rent on time a lot more frequently because they know that you're going to be, taking care of them. So a lot of good things in there. I've said many times before, the golden rule is golden. You help other people out and it ends up helping you out in the long run. All right. So
couldn't agree more.
What's next for you?
So the partnership that we've developed with this deal, we still communicate weekly, and we are continuing to look for more properties in the Ankeny market. We have a goal to reach the 200 unit mark. And ironically enough, shortly after closing, we were presented with a 52 unit and 40 unit in the market. And we are currently analyzing those, doing some pre-underwriting on those. Yeah. And the competition has heated up even since we got this deal under contract. But yeah, it sounds like the general partnership team is going to stick together, and we're going to continue to grow in the Ankeny market.
All right. That sounds awesome. And I think that happens with a lot of people. I should have asked this question earlier, but out of your group, you didn't have any experience in syndications, but out of your other partners, did anybody else have experience in syndications?
So the asset manager, their previous experience was on the passive side. They are limited partners in 3 deals, and the operators that they invested with came in to kind of mentor and be GP on this deal. So there's a little experience. I have the least, and then the operator, the manager, they are kind of in the middle, and then their partner have the most experience, and they're kind of that mentor to us.
Yeah, a lot of people, and I highly recommend that. We did the same thing on our first deal. You have to have experience to get experience in this market, kind of a conundrum. Best way to do that is to partner up with somebody with experience. But anyway, what I was going to say on that one, a lot of times, one of my mentors always talks about the law of the first deal, where once you get one under contract, it's a lot easier to get your second and your subsequent deal because you have that experience. And it seems like that's the case with you guys right now too. So almost last question, but one of my favorites on this episode. What advice would you give an aspiring investor that's 6 to 12 months behind you?
This could last really long, but I will try not to do that. So educate yourself as much as you can. Don't be afraid to get on the phone and call the people that are doing what you want to do. If you're listening to podcasts like this, you will run across those folks that have recently been where you want to be, and reach out to them, because there is no better way to learn than to talk to someone who's done it. Yeah. And, there's so many things we've even talked about today, Brian, that if I would have made a call 6 months ago to you or to one of your other guests, I potentially could have mitigated that survey problem that we had that pushed our closing back.
Yeah.
It's the unforeseen thing that you might get a heads up on.
Yeah.
Same with capital raising. If I would have reached out to you and said, hey, I'm going to be raising capital here pretty soon, it's going to be pretty easy, I bet you would have
laughed.
Laughed and given me a quick lesson that, hey, brother, you better think this. Yeah. And here's some things that you might run into. Yeah. And then you take that advice and process it and then move forward. I think you will avoid that 2-step back, and you'll just plug it away.
All right. And last question before we end, how can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, so they can reach out on email. It's probably the best way to get me. Okay. That is trinitygroup88@gmail.com.
All right.
And if you search my name up on LinkedIn, sure, we could connect on LinkedIn.
All right. And we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile and to your email address in the show notes for anybody who's interested in reaching out. That said, Todd, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your experience, and very much appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Brian. It's been fun.
All right.